project. Now, if you're listening to this or watching this on the replay and it sounds a bit different, it's because I'm doing it on Instagram Live as a test, just to see if I can then take the recording and put it onto our newsletter and our podcast, etc., etc. So if the quality is not that great, forgive me. Next week I won't do it. But I wanted to do this live so I could get some interaction if people want to tune in live. But I wanted to talk today. I was having this discussion with Morgan on the podcast yesterday, and I get reached out to by people for interviews all the time. And she was saying, oh, this person, you might want to interview her, but she has a book that's similar to your own. And so for those of you who don't know, I have the Beginner's Guide to Pageantry. And there's been this idea. I mean, I've been a coach for a very, very long time. I was a life coach before I was a pageant coach. And then I was a tennis coach before I was a life coach. And I've come up against this mentality that some coaches have, that they have secrets. And they guard these so-called secrets very jealously. I know that in my first tennis coaching job, for example, I was leaving that job anyway. But then the head coach I was working under, found out that I was going to start working for someone else. And look, the reason I was going to work for that someone else is because they were going to pay me more than twice as much. But he pulled me aside and said, I'm very disappointed that you decided to work for someone else, because I don't want you to give all my secrets away, all the secrets I've given you, and give it to this other coach. Now, I've come up against this in pageant coaching as well. I have a friend who announced, and she's an international title holder, she announced that she was going to start working as a coach. And then the person who had coached her messaged her, said he was very disappointed, said he was worried that she was going to give away all his secrets, and then I think proceeded to unfollow her, maybe even block her. And here's the thing. I don't think, and you can disagree with me on this if you're a coach, I don't think there really is any such thing as a coaching secret. I think all of us have built on the legacy of the people who've come before us. I mean, let's be honest. When you go into a pageant interview, or when you're on the runway, whatever it is, I don't think there's anything that you would have thought of as a coach that no one else in the history of the entire earth has ever thought of before. Now, if we take Morgan as an example, so my friend Morgan, who's on the podcast with us, Morgan is very good at what she does, and she gets very, very good results. Is there anything that she does that no trainer has ever thought of before? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, Morgan could weigh in on this. But I know, for example, Morgan has actually done a lot of study. She said she'll tell you that she has her head always buried in PubMed articles, which, if you don't know, is basically a database of studies. I wouldn't recommend it as the most interesting reading. But the point is, there's a lot of information there. And yes, she is an amazing coach. She's an amazing friend. But is there something that she's going to teach you that no one has ever thought before? I don't know. I mean, she often talks about, calories in, calories out sort of thing. That's kind of been around since the dawn of time, when people wanted to start, getting into shape. And so I don't believe that there's any such thing as coaching secrets that only one coach knows and that no one else knows. And I, just from my own point of view, would be very wary of working with a coach who really thinks they have secrets. Now, that's not to discount the fact that some coaches, particularly if they've competed in the past, will have specific niche knowledge that could be valuable to you. So if someone competed in Miss whatever it was last year, and it was a specific pageant that you're going to compete in, and it's the same director, some of the same contestants, maybe the same pageant judges, then yes, I'm not going to deny that they might have some insider knowledge. I'm not going to say it's coaching knowledge, but there's insider knowledge that could be very beneficial to you. Now, what I will say, that specialized knowledge has a very short shelf life. So if they competed in a pageant and it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it was in a different state, I mean, I would argue that, pageantry has changed a lot I don't need to tell you this, you know this, pageantry has changed a lot. The world has changed a lot in the last 10 or 20 years. And someone who won a pageant 10, 20 years ago, I would argue, I don't know how relevant that information is. Some of it's going to be relevant for sure. I think a lot of it's not. You've got to remember, we basically had the world ending in 2020 with COVID. I mean, that alone changed the entire ball game. In the last 10, 20 years, we've had the advent of social media, of the internet, of AI. And so that sort of knowledge, like, oh, I won Miss So-and-so back in 1932, and so you should take me as a coach. I don't buy that. But my attitude with my coaching clients, whether it's been tennis coaching or life coaching or now pageant coaching, it's always been this mindset, and this might be a bit weird or a bit naive, but I've always thought I want what's best for my client. And so I will happily work with you, even if you're working with someone else. And if you think I'm the best fit for you, then you'll work with me. If another coach is a better fit for you, then I want you to work with them. Why? Because I want what's best for you as a client. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Like, if I'm interested in you, in your best interest as my client, then I should want you to work with the best of the best, whatever that means to you. So whether it's working with me, whether it's with working with someone else, it doesn't bother me. I remember when I was coaching tennis, sometimes people would have me as their coach for one facet, and they'd work with another coach for another facet. So maybe another coach had access to more students so they could hit against, think of it like a mock interview. Like if you have a bank of students all practicing together, so they had access to more of that, then they could work on that with that coach and then come to me for specialized, let's say, technical advice, because my niche in tennis really was that I taught myself. And so I had a lot of technical knowledge in terms of how to hit the ball. I had a lot of knowledge in terms of how to use video analysis, what to look for in the biomechanics of a swing, things like that. But the point is, in all of my coaching experience for more than 2 decades, I honestly don't want to remember how long I've been coaching at this point. Actually, now that I think about it, it's more than 2 decades. But anyway, I don't think at any point I have come across a coach and went, wow, that is something I have never, ever heard of before. That is a secret, and I'm going to guard it and keep it jealously to myself. Now, what I will say, if you ask me, have you ever had any sort of breakthroughs as a coach or highlights as a coach? Yes. But I don't think it's a secret, and neither do I think it's some genius moment that I had. I think what happens sometimes, and you may want to look at this, whether you're a coach or whether you're having coaching, what I do have is a very wide array of life experiences. And you'll see this, you'll notice this when I'm interviewing people. So I just interviewed Hannah Kelsey, who's Miss Boston, USA. And this is someone who, growing up, was on the track to become a competitive tennis player. I have that experience. As I have tennis experience. I coached at an all-girls school, so I know what it's like to work with young women specifically. Then she studied engineering. I also studied engineering. She said she's a nerd. I'm also a nerd, right? And then she went through a brain tumor. My grandmother died from a brain tumor. Both my grandparents actually passed from cancer, so I have that knowledge. Her dad's a doctor. I come from a family of doctors. But the point is, when you're working with someone, when you're working with a coach, the breakthrough moments or the genius moments, or let's say the things that you never would have thought of, they don't come usually because the coach or whoever it is a once in a generation genius. It tends to happen because they have this intersection of knowledge. And so pageant knowledge is one area. But if that's the only area of knowledge you have, I would say you have limited insight. I'm not saying you have no insight, but I think you have limited insight. If you take, on the other hand, someone who has the intersection of pageant coaching knowledge with, let's say, sports coaching knowledge, then there's more insight, right? Because you now have an intersection. These are people, I think they call them polyglots. I can't remember exactly what the term was, but people who have knowledge in multiple areas, and then they bring those areas together. I think Da Vinci is the classic case that's put up, because he had not only mathematical knowledge, but I think highly creative and artistic knowledge as well. And so he came up with some, people would call genius things, but it really was the intersection of knowledge. So if your coach only has pageant knowledge, I'm not dismissing that, that's great. But I think there's limited insights. On the other hand, if you have someone who has the pageant coaching knowledge, maybe broader coaching knowledge, then maybe business knowledge, right? Marketing knowledge. And then on top of that, maybe they have life coaching knowledge. Maybe they have whatever experience they have. That person then, I think it's more likely they can give you genuine insights. Because I have to say, in my experience, again, in over 2 decades of coaching, the genius insights that I've heard from other coaches have really been not because they're so smart. I'm not saying they're not, but it's not because they're smart. It's because they have a broader array of experience and they're bringing it to the table as a coach. And that's what you can learn from the most. I really don't think, whether it's in business, whether it's in pageantry, whether it's in sports, whether it's in life in general, that there's any such thing as a genuine coaching secret that only one coach knows and that no one else can teach you. I will agree that I think certain people have certain unique intersections of knowledge, and that can help them create incredibly valuable insights. But let's be honest, in this day and age with AI, even if there was such a thing as a genuine coaching secret, it's got a shelf life of maybe, in this day and age, maybe a couple of months before everyone knows about it. Because that's how quickly word's going to spread in this day, not only with social media, the internet, but AI as well. So when it comes time to working with a coach, I strongly advise you not to just look at their area of expertise, but also see if they have any other areas where they have experience or expertise. Because I think that is going to increase. Those are birds, by the way. Welcome to Australia, not pterodactyls. In my experience, the best coaches have been the coaches that have multiple areas of life experience, because they're the ones who have those unique insights. Because again, those sections, those areas where those areas of experience intersect and combine. And I think that's what leads some coaches to have insights that other coaches maybe don't. And again, look, if you're looking for a pageant coach and you just want to pick someone who won Miss whatever it was last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, then more power to you. You do that. But what I will say is, again, I think that sort of niche experience, when someone says, oh, you should come to me and work with me because I won Miss USA, Miss America, whatever it is, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I think you really need to take that with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that is worthless information, far from it, but it is highly specific information. You have to decide whether that information is still relevant, and more so whether it's relevant to you, because what worked for someone else may not work for you, especially in pageantry, because pageantry is so subjective, it's so individual. And so even if a coach has that experience of winning, let's say a title that you want, I think you really want to make sure they know how to coach. And I think you really want to make sure they have some life experience outside of the pageant sphere. Because for me, the pageant sphere is so localized, it's so specialized, that if that's the only area you know about, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. I mean, I've said very often, and people keep quoting this back to me, I said the best way to succeed in pageantry is to create an amazing life outside of it. Now, I stand by that. And I will say, when I came up with that quote, it wasn't because of pageantry. It probably was because I was reading some book by who knows what. But again, it was the intersection of knowledge. It's not because I'm a genius. It's just because I happened to think of it at that moment. And it's because I was thinking about something outside of pageantry. But if that's true and you buy that the best way to succeed in pageantry is to create an amazing life outside of it. And by the way, I think that's a direction that pageantry in the Western world is moving, at least. If you buy that, then you really need to also accept that one of the best ways for you to get ahead is for yourself, for yourself to find a coach who has experience outside of the pageant sphere. Because I think if you just do pageant, and I've worked with some clients like this, and I love them to bits. But once you poke past the genetically blessed exterior, there's really not that much to get to talk about. These are not the sorts of people who can have long and involved conversations. And I think in this day and age, with social media, and things can fall apart very quickly, you really want to be someone who can think on her feet, who has a broad range of life experience to draw from, and can interact with as many people as possible. And I will say, as I said, I just interviewed Hannah Kelsey, who's Miss Boston, USA. One of the reasons I enjoy conversations like that so much is because she has such a broad range of life experience at the age of 20-something, right? On the track to be a competitive tennis player, engineer, nerd, brain tumor survivor. And then yesterday, I was interviewing Victoria Treadwell, who survived an overdose, right? And very upfront about that, very courageous to talk about that. Could consider that a very taboo subject traditionally in pageantry. But I love speaking to people like that who have life experience that I don't, because that's when I feel like I'm really learning from someone. So just a thought. Maybe when you're looking to work with someone, or maybe if you're looking for an unusual way to get an advantage in your next pageant competition, maybe it's not just in pageants. Maybe it's about going out and having some other life experiences. Whether you decide to become a professional tennis player, whether you decide to skydive, whether you decide to become a pilot, whatever it is, whether you decide to go back to school as a mature age student and finally finish your high school graduate diploma, whatever it is, all of those things, as tangential as they might seem, make you a genuinely more interesting person in interview. And then when you have those different life experiences and you find the intersection, that's when I think you'll find what really uniquely makes you you, and you can also find your own genius moments. So, just some thoughts. As I said, I'm not a big believer in coaching secrets. You guys do you. And I'll say thanks for watching, and hopefully this sounded okay and looks okay. If so, I can do more lives. But I will speak to you guys next week.